What's up, everyone? Welcome to Clear Talk. So, in this video, we're going to be kind of going over this kind of exposed master plan of sorts for America that Elon Musk is potentially trying to move or implement by his sort of fixation in being a part of Trump's campaign and putting forth him being, even a part of his administration and what he's kind of ultimately seems like he might be working towards. And so we're going to be looking at this a little section of this interview with from Crystal Kyle and Friends, where Crystal and Kyle are interviewing a guy named Sam Butler. He's kind of a journalist, writer, whatever, who has been doing the research into uh, Elon Musk, along with the people that he's surrounded with, and this ideology behind a kind of like a corporate, like uh, doing away with the democratic like idea of our country system, and pretty much trying to implement in something that's more in a kind of corporate monarch. And he kind of goes through and explains how this already somewhat exists to some degree in um, I think he says Hong Kong, if I'm not mistaken. And the way their system kind of runs, it's somewhat similar to that, but in kind of a more it's slightly different, but it's almost in that kind of aspect. Anyways, I'm gonna let them kind of explain that. But anyway, this we're gonna go through this because I find this very interesting, especially on the fact that Elon's been all suddenly just appeared in all this. I mean, he's been slowly moving in that direction as far as being for Trump and everything, but him like really getting deep into the functions and everything of the campaign and going along on the trail and doing rallies and stuff himself and trying to get himself into the camp like administration and all that kind of stuff. It's been kind of throwing up some red flags for me. When anytime a super some kind of a superpower billionaire inputs their self in politics, it doesn't matter whether it's Republican or Democratic or whatever. It seems to be always a red flag. I mean, that's the reason why Trump himself is a red flag from the get go, um, and how Trump is in with this, or to what extent he might be, and then or whether he's really just being used, or whatever the case. It's very interesting thing that they lay out here, and so I kind of wanted to look at it, talk about it, or whatever. So yeah, the whole interview is like 30 minutes long, but we're gonna look at a section that's roughly about 5, maybe 10 minutes, um, where he kind of just basically lays it out. But anyways, thank you very much for joining. If you like what I'm doing here, please consider subscribing, like, share, all that good stuff. Check out my other channels. Check those out. JMDPLAY, JM JM Drummer. You do have the Discord there. Have the one-time donation, or you can go up to JMD Nation at Patreon. $3 a month there. Anything you do is much appreciated. Thank you very much. Yeah, like I said, like we know, uh, it's just with all this different things that he's been doing here lately. And this goes beyond just Elon Musk, but he seems to be the current one that is really trying to take this and potentially um, mold this into an administration or into place. To what extent he would actually be able to actually get it to happen is a different story. Because he also has a history of not exactly following through with things completely. Um, but anyways, they kind of go over some of that. But well, I don't know if we'll technically get to that, but anyways, we're going to look at this real quick. uh, listen. So what help them listen to them lay it out for us.
So again, to lay this out, you have people like J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Curtis Yarvin, who's like the father philosophically. They are using Trump for the following. And to illustrate my point, I'm going to read right from Curtis Yarvin's Wikipedia page here. He says, democracy should be replaced by a, quote, accountable monarchy, similar to the governance structure of corporations. Yarvin has been described as a neo-reactionary and neo-monarchist who sees liberalism as creating a matrix-like totalitarian system and who wants to replace American democracy with a sort of techno-monarchy. So in other words, what that means is they want to establish, I guess, what we can call little corporate fiefdoms, where they say this, they say, you'll be free in every possible arena except democratically. So, like, you basically live in a corporate fiefdom where there's a CEO, there's an executive who runs it, and you're like a peasant in that system. So, I mean, speak a little bit about that, because we saw Elon Musk just registered United States of America, Inc., which, when I first saw that, I was like, okay, that's weird. But now that I have this extra piece of context that, like, this is their philosophical framework and what they're trying to implement under a Trump executive who runs it, and you're like a peasant in that system. So, I mean, speak a little bit about that, because we saw Elon Musk just registered United States of America, Inc., which, when I first saw that, I was like, okay, that's weird. But now that I have this extra piece of context that, like, this is their philosophical framework and what they're trying to implement under a Trump administration, now that seems more nefarious than I realized, that they're actually trying to create these corporate monarchist fiefdoms where somebody like Peter Thiel might run one and Elon Musk might run another, and to have J.D. Vance, who is their hand-picked candidate as Trump's VP, and Trump's an idiot. They're going to use him to these ends. Do you fear that the goal is we're going to sort of try to implement this in real life in the United States of America?
So like kind of like this idea is that it's like you would be living under some sort of like system where you would have sections or whatever, and I don't know if it would be divided, like sections divided up across the United States, or the United States would just be its own like section. But this is like a new world kind of order kind of thing, where it's like where it's like a technology based, corporate based monarchy, where you have someone controlling a certain section or area of a space on the whatever, and everybody, and they are they make the rules, laws, and you have freedoms, but you're not ever really voting for anything. They're just like I said, a corporate kind of structure, like you would in a corporation, a big business, and you just have to accept whatever the big boss decides, for whatever it's. And then of course there's a lot of security thing that he's going to go into detail about, tech surveillance and things like it's a whole thing they're going to go into here. So
yeah, so the way that I would break it down, and there's some different visions, I think a lot of this owes to a lack of specificity in what these people are talking about, like not really rooted in history despite what they're citing. So you have visions, they say it's like Singapore and then Hong Kong and then Dubai, and these are substantively different systems. But, to get to your point on this idea of corporate fiefdoms, I think what it amounts to is sort of carving out zones where a corporation, an executive, a wealthy person or elite will have sovereignty in that area. And the place that we get to this idea of, the corporate fiefdom, I think, comes to security and this privatized notion of security, similar to like a gated community. So the example I bring there with Argentina, under the new libertarian anarcho-capitalist President Javier Milei, who Peter
there's a glitch right here in this video.
Just, ideas are as relevant for Argentina as they are for the globe. Elon Musk basically repeated the same thing. This was in the past few months. what they're doing in Argentina is they are privatizing everything. Milei said everything that can belong to the private sector will belong to the private sector, handing all of this out, slashing public spending. But the one thing they are investing in on the public side is a predictive policing division, which would use a mix of AI and surveillance in order to predict future crimes. Now, getting away from the Minority Report aspect, the dystopian or the speculative nature of it, it's just really, I think, a capital efficient way for them to handle security when they're privatizing everything. And just, of course, noting that these systems have already been deployed and prototyped and implemented in Gaza and, by the Israeli occupation. So it's there, it's real. And to bring it back from this philosophy, which can point in a lot of different directions, and people say, how real is that really? Just frankly put, it's like gated communities that are sort of governed by corporations or the elites. You're living there, and then you're under this privatized security system using a mix of AI, surveillance. Elon Musk is building the robots, right? The news came out this week. Every headline described it as Elon Musk's robot army. So I would just say it in a really grounded way that that's sort of the intent, is to have communities where the wealthy and powerful are sovereign. They're the ones who have political power. If you're a resident there, you're primarily there as disposable labor, as sort of an underclass. This is the model that we see in Dubai, where a very large proportion of residents are foreigners, are foreign workers who have no political rights. And then the place where we get, I think, into sort of this tech-infused vision is just like what Argentina is trying to do. It's sort of in the privatization of security as a model that they can really roll out, I guess, in a capital-efficient way.
Yeah. So I don't see Donald Trump in this framework as so much of a useful idiot as someone who is quite ideologically aligned with this vision. I believe it was John Kelly recently, was one of the people who has come out recently, Trump's former chief of staff, and spilled the tea on what a fascist, authoritarian, Hitler-loving freak Donald Trump really is, who was saying he loves dictators and he wants the whole country to be run like he's CEO and you can just do whatever you want. It's not like we don't have a familiarity in our work lives with what it looks like to be beholden to a dictator over whom you have no say over. That's what it looks like in workplaces, in the vast majority of workplaces where you have a CEO or your boss who, what they say goes, period, end of story. At the same time, I think it's unlikely they're going to achieve their utopian Red Caesar corporate fiefdom dreams in one Trump term. So what do you think that Elon thinks he can actually accomplish in another Trump term of, in the White House?
Because that's what has recently come out. You had Jim Kelly or John Kelly, whatever his name is, come out with the whole Trump being basically just saying that he was a fascist. When you look at the ideology or the definition of fascism, Trump encompassed that to its totalitarianism, totality. He and we've had the reports where he or stating that he wanted. He wished he had generals that were like the generals of Hitler, and that that things that he wanted to do. This oftentimes brought up that Trump didn't want to, that he didn't engage in wars. There was no new wars technically started under him, but that wasn't by design of him. It was actually because of the generals that actually resisted things that he wanted to actually do and implement. It wasn't because of him, it was because of the generals that we didn't actually have any new technical, wars started. Now, outside of the attack on Soleimani, which, clearly was probably the generals went along with, but he there was several other things that Trump wanted to do, things that that he wanted to do militarily, even to the idea of attacking. I want to say even like North Korea, and even attacking Russia, like things that he wanted to do, and the generals pushed against it, stating that we can't do that. And so basically, it's like Trump was getting frustrated because he's used to being like a boss of a corporation where people just listen to him. He says what they do what he does, do what he says, doesn't go against him. So he was getting constantly frustrated with people in the administration that were pushing back against him, not allowing things to happen the way he wanted them to happen. And that's the reason why he oftentimes kept trying to fire people and whatnot, because that's just, has his mentality. He's the mentality of a corporate, CEO. He just, you don't do what he asks, he fires you, gets rid of you. And that's just kind of the way he worked in Washington. So, where he would make all the claims that everybody he fired and stuff was because they were no good. They were, they didn't, they were bad at their job or whatever the case, bad people or whatever. And that's the way his followers oftentimes take it as well. It wasn't so much that as that they just weren't doing what he asked, because he was asking and saying things that you just shouldn't be doing. And they were going against him, pushing against him, and he didn't like that. So he wants, clearly wants to implement and have people around him that listen to him and do what he says, and doesn't, he wants to be. There's reason why he talks often about how the head of China, or like Putin or whatever, like he's oftentimes talking about how great they are as dictators, as authoritarians. They have control and people listen to them, and all. That's the exact same thing that he wants. He wants to be in that authoritarian dictator like fashion, where system, implemented into the as a president, where he can just say and do what he wants to happen, and people do it without question. And that's where this whole idea, even though he denies and says that he has nothing to do with Project 2025, but that's like one of the main things a part of 25 is removing the administrative state and allowing for him to be able to place political people behind him that will do what he says in those places across all, any of those, any organization or whatever, or whatever department that we have for different things, that are supposed to be nonpartisan. They're supposed to just work on the in the lane of just doing the job regardless of what without any kind of ideological or whatever partisan political backing or direction. It's just things just supposed to happen. They're supposed to be independent, unbiased. He wants to put people in place that are going to be biased, basically, and do what he says and do how he wants, and implement things how he wants them to be implemented, whether it's we're talking about regulations on businesses or environmental stuff or whatever the case, or handling things for whatever grab whatever topic you want out of the sky, and that's what he wants full control of that, and doesn't want any kind of professionals that would come against him or anything, or somebody who has more experience, giving him any kind of contradiction in what he wants, to see happen, or what he thinks needs to happen, or whatever the case. He wants to be all-knowing, all-encompassing dictator, basically. And so to her point there was that, where Kyle said he's kind of the useful idiot, and this is really Elon Musk and Teal and all them, like they're really trying to just use him as a vessel. She was saying that, I actually feel like, he is actually just as much a part of this as they are. And because this kind of falls into where he wants to, align himself, and which is a very good argument. And I feel, and so anyway, we'll just go from there. It kind of lines all up, even to me, as where, where he even lies in this.
So really quickly, can I talk about Trump's
Yeah.
sort of ideological ties to this?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's a really good and salient point, and I think it's true also. And so sort of in doing the research, one of the right-wing academics that's cited here, it's Hans Hermann Hoppe, I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, who authored a book called Democracy, the God That Failed. And one of the ideas in this book is that, in order to have a libertarian state, this is a quote, I hope I'm getting this right, that progressives and communists would have to be purged. So we're hearing Trump say the same types of things, not only in terms of retiring government employees, but very much a lot more persecution of people who are the ideological opponents. And I would add another layer that Trump does have a long history politically and economically to these sorts of ideas. When you get into sort of low tax economic zones, like he's used for some of his New York real estate, this really basic idea of private capture of public wealth, getting massive subsidies and not paying taxes on his real estate properties in New York City and things like that. And just the last place where I'd say Trump comes into this is, in the past couple of years, he's talked and promoted this idea of freedom cities or freedom communities, which is very much in line with which is very much in line with everything that we're talking about here. Again, this notion of, the gated community, sovereignty by the rich and powerful. They get their resources from, who knows where, the workers who are not mentioned. So I think that there's a lot of clear and conscious Trump ties to this ideology as well. In terms of Musk and, what we anticipate he can get, there's a great New York Times article published, I think, on Monday, which was basically saying that, in a second Trump administration, Musk would be in this position of regulating the regulators who are supposed to oversee his companies. And he has so many billions of dollars in public contracts and public-private partnerships in all of these agencies, with SpaceX, with Starlink, with Tesla. I think, certainly with Neuralink, they're being investigated in many cases. As an example, with Tesla, I think they're being investigated for some of the safety issues with some of these self-driving cars. So, that's one aspect, is that Musk would be able to regulate or have power over the people who are supposed to be regulating and putting a check to him. And then the other aspect, just one note, is in a second Trump administration and a replacement of FCC Chair Lina Khan with, a Trump loyalist, that could mean, this is just one example, another $1 billion in contracts for rural broadband subsidies to Musk. And that was denied Musk in the Biden administration, in part because this was supposed to be for rural broadband internet. And Musk was, trying to use it to fund an internet scheme in like a New York airport. Right. So it's like very legitimate grounds that this was denied. So I think there's sort of an anticipation that, more ability to have sort of private sway, private influence over these contracts, over the conduct of government. And again, he and Teal said it themselves in the past couple months, looking at everything Milei has done up to now, after Milei has talked about everything that can belong to the private sector will belong to the private sector. They say these ideas are as relevant globally as they are to Argentina. So I think that gives the game up right there.
So let me walk everybody through this aspect of it. You have Curtis Yarvin. He talks about rage, retire all government employees, right? You have Elon Musk and Trump have talked about the Doge agency, which is Department of Government Efficiency. And you pointed out something in your article I actually didn't know. And I'm surprised I missed this somehow, but as part of Project 2025 is getting rid of this thing called Schedule F, which basically means they want the career nonpartisan bureaucrats to be basically totally all gotten rid of, and for Trump to rehire some number of them, but make them all MAGA loyalists effectively. So what this means in practice is the EPA, the NLRB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the FTC, like all these different people who do all these different important nonpartisan jobs, get rid of them and fill some of the positions with utter partisan hacks and like handcuff these agencies so they do nothing, and then make it so that the private sector sort of regulates itself. So the way that I'm connecting all these dots, is this how you see it too? That you have Yarvin talking about retire all government employees, rage, Trump and Elon talking about Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, which is the same thing. And then you pointed out Trump already signed an executive order to get rid of Schedule F. And he just wasn't able, he did it like at the end of his administration. So when Biden came back in, he was able to reverse it. But under a Trump second term, if in the first day he signed an executive order to get rid of Schedule F again, the entire administrative state is poof, gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard this from somebody involved in the public sector, and I'm not completely sure on, why the timeline came so late in the Trump administration for the executive order Schedule F. But one thing I heard actually was the purpose of signing that so late at that point after the 2020 election was actually to totally freeze the administrative state at the beginning of the Biden term, where what they were actually going for and what they were hoping for with that was that Schedule F would come into play before Biden's inauguration, kind of before all of these positions could be appointed and filled. And basically you'd have this step of all of these employees could be fired, and then it would take so much, legal work, it would take so much time. At that point, the administrative state, the civil service, would be completely frozen. So that was, sort of their backup plan for, Trump not winning in the 2020 election was, at least if we're not going to win, we're going to try to totally stop the public sector anyway by just making it impossible for the Biden administration and anybody working in it to do anything. So that was kind of shocking for me to hear, and probably how close it might have come to fruition. And yeah, then I would agree with you. I think that's absolutely right.
How does the development of AI play into all of this? Because, yeah, we're talking about a broader, like, right-wing tech movement. We've seen, this isn't AI, but associated crypto. Trump totally flipped his view on crypto.
That's right.
Kamala, crypto has basically already won this election,
That's
sadly.
Right, yeah.
Kamala's already, signaled she's going to be far more friendly than the Biden administration has been. They have spent more money than any other industry in the 2024 elections. And after they effectively were able to kick Katie Porter out of her seat by dumping tons of money into a race against her, a bunch of other politicians, Democrat and Republican, got the message like, okay, we just better do whatever the crypto people want us to do. But, specifically with regard to AI, it seems like this pivot to tech oligarch takeover is coming at a particularly fraught moment where AI development is taking off. It's already in the hands of a few giant tech companies, and it's very hard to predict how impactful that's going to be in all of our lives moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I would break this down in two directions. One, what we're seeing proposed in Argentina, which has sort of already been deployed in Gaza, which is the notion of using AI and mass surveillance to execute on these, security objectives, to crush dissent, or to persecute people, or potentially worse ends like that. So that's one aspect where I think it comes in, right?
So we could see that, for example, in the mass deportation plan. You could see the deployment of AI in order to, turn every community in America into an absolute police state and, round up legal and undocumented immigrants in order to put them in concentration camps and ultimately deport them.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the direction. So, one way this has been documented in Gaza is that the Israeli occupation will use AI to monitor all of the social media and even like the WhatsApp group message posts of Palestinians. And as an example, when they find that a Palestinian person has posted a message on social media or in a WhatsApp group about the death of their loved ones, that is then a future crime, and that person is traced and targeted and rounded up for detention.
Wow.
So that's one example of how this really hits home in social media. And then we see Musk has access to all of this data already. So that's one side of it. And then I think the other aspect where AI comes into play on this is just labor and displacing labor and workers' rights in capitalist interests, and sort of better enabling these tycoons to get what they want, potentially in these gated communities or in these corporate fiefdoms. Without having the same types they would believe, without having the same types of dependence on the underclass of workers that they've created. And that becomes interesting when it comes to sort of manual labor and what they anticipate there. And then you also see some tie-ins to what Musk is doing and making with those robots. They've certainly talked about this being a replacement for manual labor, and what some of the more agile kind of robotics companies are doing. But yeah, so I would see it on those two ends: is one, sort of monitoring, surveillance to advance these basic fascist security aims. And then the other side being, this is a way where we can detach ourselves from our dependence on workers. And, we can separate that even further out, ultimately, giving them more power over, what will be, and having less of a role for workers and labor and kind of all of us to play in our lives.
So
Yeah, I think as far as it's just this the whole idea of this whole tech state, um and AI taking over, and corporations, CEOs and things, the rich and powerful having more control over our communities and stuff. I mean, if you really think about it, you see all this, all these our land and properties, housing and stuff being bought up by um corporations and stuff. And then that's the reason why we're having a lot of rental hikes and things being more expensive in our housing system, which has been going on for for the past 5 to 10 years, a little by little. I mean, you start tacking on all these different things, um and you really start to see the picture of what is potentially going on here, where uh, people like Elon Musk, and these other, uh, and he has even further plans and stuff. All his plans with Mars and stuff like that. Like this, like he is so like, I mean, it sounds like some super uh intelligent like thing. It's really on the surface of just basic greed and power, and what you can manipulate. And he's been influenced. It's not like he's come up with this. He's been influenced by other people on this. And but like him wanting to become, he's on track to become the first trillionaire or whatever. And the money that he's putting, he wants to, all the money that he's making, all these he's wanting to put a lot, most of which into trying to colonate Mars, and being to get by, I think it's 2055 or whatever, having it to where a million people could live on Mars by then. And for the most part, it would be like rich, wealthy, that could afford to even go in the first place. Um, it just seems awful crazy though that you would, why worry about that? That's where you want to use all your money instead of using your money to make things better here on Earth, on a planet that is already set to, you know, to atmospherically and everything else for humanity. It's the problem with Earth is not Earth itself; it's us and what we are doing to the Earth. But you want to then just try to colonate and move to a planet that atmospherically is not built and meant for humanity. But you want to create this false. It just atmosphere for humanity to live in, and live there instead of just fixing and making things better here in an environment that's already built for us and made for us in, you know, the grand whatever universe of how things come together and whatnot. The perfect setup is here. We are the ones ruining it. And it almost seems like that's just more of or an easier even way of control for Mars. Like, you're under even more strict system as far as um these type of the environment that would have to be created there in order for humanity to even exist there. It would have to be more like a actual just sort of restricted um area, because environmentally you would not technically have any freedom there. I mean, not like you have here where you have freedom to be able to really go anywhere on the on the planet, for the most part. I mean, yeah, there's some extremities, but I mean, like, it just doesn't make any sense there. But on top of that, it's like he wants to go ahead and even ruin things here even more by more control, AI induced, taking over jobs, to make it to where people are even more, I guess, you know, controlled or in the realm of of the powerful. I mean, it is very it's something that I feel is something to be concerned about. Is something to watch and keep in mind. And if Elon, if Elon gets his way, and he's been, with, trying to buy Trump into winning the election, um, and can get his hands into the administration where he's given a position to, control those who are trying to basically keep him in check. That's like this. That's the whole idea. It's just the whole movement idea between what Trump wants and then what Elon wants. Like they're not technically the same, but they they have the same underlying idea. Each one of them controlling something that they want to control, but even though they're not the same things, it's still about control. Um, and for him to be able to get in there and, there's supposed to be checks and balances. That's the way our system is supposed to be set up. But little by little bit, more and more corporations, rich and powerful, have been picking and picking and picking and chipping away at those, checks and balances, to the point that they are trying their best to actually remove all those checks and balances. And that's what the administrative state is, part of the administrative state is about checks and balances, regulating and making sure that, because private corporations, their aspect is just profit, greed, money, making more, they're not beholden to really trying to be or perform for in a way that benefits everybody. Their goal is to just perform for themselves, uh, and use anything that can, legal or labor or whatever, uh, to make that happen. So That's the reason why privatization is actually the more privatization is actually detrimental to our society as a whole, and and not in the best interest of regular people. Um, I understand the argument of not having, in the opposite direction, not having full control from the government, but you have to have a check and balanced equation where, you know, corporations are held to a certain check, and with regulations, the government itself is also held to a certain check, along with humanity and civilization itself. Everybody needs to be held to a certain check and regulation, where we're all, that's the idea. That's where, uh, but corporations are trying to, you know, take it all. Everyone in full control. And you've seen that more and more over the past few decades, and that's the biggest concern, is what they are doing, the rich and wealthy are doing, and the reason why we're continuing to have a more and more separation between the rich and powerful, and the haves and have-nots. Uh, this is something to be concerned about, very much so. And if, like I said, if Elon gets in there and can unregulate himself and have complete freedom to do what he wants, then and which would mean also giving all of those that he is in cahoots with what they want as well, all the rich and powerful. This is And Trump, all he wants is his own power. Each one of them want their own power for different reasons, and that's the idea, is that we can't allow that. We can't. That should be, I think, one of the most feared things when it comes to another Trump administration. Uh, the argument keeps being, well, we've already had him for 4 years, and he wasn't able to do anything then that he really wanted to do, so it's okay. We did like some things, but the things we didn't like, it was no big deal because he wasn't able to do them. He wasn't able to implement them. Well, that's the point now, is for him to be able to set it up to where he will not have that, that pushback. There won't be people there. That's the point. That's what they're trying to set up, is so that he can actually do what he wants this time around, because he couldn't before. And that's what is so actually worrisome about him getting back in office. So, found this very interesting, and especially the whole idea of where Elon Musk and ones around him are potentially really actually behind the scenes trying to make happen, with their involvement here. And so it's something to be concerned with. There are several different reasons for all this to be concerned with, but that one certainly is one that I hadn't seen, didn't really know about. But it's something to certainly be mindful of and concerned with. And another, just another layer of why we just can't. We got to make sure that does not come to fruition. Or it doesn't even have a possibility of it. As much as, yeah, we like to think we have a lot of checks and balances in place and stuff in place to keep that from happening. But do we really want to risk it? That's what I think we need to be worried about. Thank you very much. This went a little longer as usual than I really expected, but I think it still was very important. Thank you very much. ClearTalk. Peace.